Ambassador Hanjina walked into the massive council chamber, her boots clicking against the polished floor. The room stretched out before her like a cathedral, filled with hundreds of alien beings from across the galaxy. Some floated in glass, tanks filled with purple liquid. Others perched on crystal pedestals that hummed with energy. The air smelled of ozone and something she couldn't identify. She had practiced this moment 1,000 times in her mind, but nothing could have prepared her for the sheer size of the gathering. Earth's fate hung in the balance, and she was their only voice in this sea of alien faces. The Vorthak delegate sat directly in front of her, its massive form draped across what looked like a living throne. Its tentacles, each as thick as her, arms swayed gently in the recycled air. When it spoke, its voice sounded like bubbles popping underwater. "The human requests permission to join our sacred Void Walker exercises," it announced, and Gina could hear the mockery dripping from every word. "They believe their species is ready to stand alongside the galaxy's finest warriors." Laughter erupted from every corner of the chamber. The sound was alien and disturbing, a mixture of chittering, buzzing, and sounds that made her skin crawl. The Keltharian ambassador's mandibles clicked together rapidly, creating a sound like castanets on overdrive. Gina's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to stand straight. She had expected this reaction. Earth's military had warned her that humans were seen as barely evolved primates by most galactic civilizations. Still, hearing it firsthand felt like a punch to the gut. The council speaker, a towering mechanical being with glowing red eyes, raised one metallic hand. The laughter died instantly, replaced by an expectant silence that felt even worse. "The motion to exclude humanity from the Void Walker military exercises will now be put to vote," it announced in a voice that sounded like grinding gears. "All in favor of maintaining the ban on human participation?" Lights began flickering across the chamber as delegates cast their votes. Red lights, hundreds of them, appearing faster than Gina could count. Each light felt like another nail in humanity's coffin. The Keltharian delegate turned toward her, its black eyes glittering with amusement. "Perhaps your species should try again in a millennium, little human," it said, its voice dripping with condescension. "When you have learned to walk among the stars without stumbling." More laughter filled the chamber. Gina's hands began to shake, not from fear, but from pure rage. These creatures looked down on humanity like they were insects, barely worth acknowledging. "Motion passes 847 to 1, the council speaker announced with mechanical finality. "Humans are banned from Void Walker exercises due to primitive evolutionary status. This decision stands until further review." Gina cast Earth's lone dissenting vote, her finger pressing the button with more force than necessary. Her hands trembled. As the reality hit her, the entire galaxy had just dismissed her species as worthless. But as she looked around at the smug alien faces, something cold and determined settled in her chest. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. The asteroid belt was the perfect place to hide secrets. Floating chunks of rock and metal created natural blind spots where scanners couldn't reach. Deep inside the largest asteroid, General Ko Minho had built something the galaxy would never expect, a training facility that would make their enemies think twice about calling humans primitive. Minho stood on the observation deck, watching. His hand-picked soldiers worked through another brutal exercise. Below him, Private Shin Hana crawled through a maze of twisted metal and live electrical wires. Sweat poured down her face as she solved problems that would make alien commanders quit on the spot. The scenario was simple but deadly. Navigate through enemy territory with no backup, no advanced weapons, and no hope of rescue. Most species would call it suicide. Humans called it Tuesday. "Time," Minho called out, and Hana emerged from the maze carrying 3 alien dummy heads. She had completed the course in half the time it took their best recruit last month. "Not bad," Colonel Park Yuna said, appearing beside him with a tablet full of performance data. "But the Keltharians move faster than that. She needs to shave off another 30 seconds. Minho nodded, but he wasn't worried. Hana would improve. They all would. That was the human way. Keep pushing until the impossible became routine. The facility buzzed with constant activity. In one section, engineers worked on turning everyday objects into weapons. A coffee cup became a grenade. A maintenance tool became a sniper rifle. If aliens relied on fancy equipment, humans would make do with whatever they could find. In another area, soldiers practiced something no alien military would ever consider: deliberate chaos. While other species spent centuries perfecting rigid battle formations, humans learned to embrace disorder. They practiced falling apart on purpose, only to come back together in ways their enemies couldn't predict. "Watch this," Una said, pointing to a squad working through a combat simulation. The soldiers scattered in every direction when the fake enemy appeared, looking like they were running away in panic. Then suddenly they converged from 6 different angles, hitting the target from directions that shouldn't have been possible. Minho smiled. It looked like a disaster, but it was actually pure genius. Alien commanders studied patterns and predicted outcomes. "How do you predict chaos?" "The forged credentials are ready, sir," Una reported, her voice dropping to a whisper, even though they were alone. "Took our best tech specialists 3 months to crack the Voidwalker security codes. We now have official identities for 12 different species." She handed him a small device that looked like alien technology, but was actually human engineering at its finest. "We can get our people into the exercises. Full access, complete infiltration. They'll never know we're there until it's too late." Minho took the device, feeling its weight. This little piece of metal and circuits represented months of preparation, countless hours of training, and humanity's refusal to accept defeat. "They call us primitive," he said, looking out at his soldiers who were preparing for something the galaxy thought impossible. "Good. Let them keep thinking that. The biggest advantage we have is that they'll never see us coming." Una grinned. "We're going in whether they invited us or not." Captain Lee Juno stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the stolen Keltharian uniform one last time. The synthetic armor felt wrong against his human skin, too smooth, too cold, designed for a body that had evolved on a different world under a different sun. But after months of practice, he could move in it without looking awkward. The hardest part hadn't been stealing the uniform. It had been learning to think like a Keltharian. Humans naturally gestured with their hands when they talked, but Keltharians communicated through subtle movements of their mandibles. Humans made eye contact to show respect, but for Keltharians, direct eye contact was considered a challenge to fight. Every species had their quirks, and Juno's team had spent countless hours studying them all. They watched diplomatic footage until their eyes burned, practiced alien walking patterns until their legs ached, and memorized cultural details that most beings forgot about their own people. "Radio check," he whispered into his collar, activating the encrypted communication system hidden inside the uniform's fabric. "Loud and clear, Captain," came Sergeant Kimara's voice through the tiny speaker in his ear. She was somewhere on the other side of the massive space station, disguised as a Vorthak engineer. "Ready to become a ghost? The Voidwalker exercises were the galaxy's most prestigious military event. 50 different species had gathered across 3 star systems to show off their finest warriors, their most advanced ships, and their deadliest tactics. It was like the Olympics, but with weapons that could destroy planets. Security was tight, but it was designed to keep out armies, not individuals who had learned to blend in perfectly. Juno walked through the checkpoint, his forged identification, passing every scan. The guards barely looked at him, just another Keltharian officer among thousands. The main observation deck stretched out before him like a window into space itself. Massive holographic displays showed the exercises happening across multiple worlds. Fleet formations that had taken centuries to perfect moved in perfect synchronization. Ground forces advanced with mathematical precision. Everything was choreographed, planned and executed exactly as their manuals prescribed. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said a real Keltharian officer standing next to him. "Such perfect order." Juno nodded, making sure to click his fake mandibles in appreciation. "Truly magnificent," he replied in flawless Keltharian dialect. But inside he was thinking something completely different. This wasn't magnificent, it was predictable. Every formation was straight out of a textbook. Every maneuver followed established patterns that any military academy student could recognize. "Textbook perfect," Ara's voice whispered in his ear. She was watching from a different location, recording everything through cameras hidden in her disguise. And completely predictable. Juno smiled behind his mask. Exactly what we need. While the galaxy's finest warriors showed off their rigid perfection, human infiltrators moved through the crowds like ghosts. They recorded every weakness, noted every pattern, and identified every moment where alien commanders chose predictability over adaptability. The aliens thought they were watching a display of military superiority. The humans knew they were watching a preview of their enemy's defeat. The first sign something was wrong came as a low rumble that seemed to shake the entire space station. Lieutenant Kang Do-yeon was adjusting her surveillance equipment when the sound hit, followed immediately by the piercing wail of emergency sirens that made her blood run cold. Through her high-powered scope, she watched the Vorthak flagship, a massive vessel that had been showing off its perfect battle formations just minutes before. The proud ship that had dominated the exercise suddenly looked small and vulnerable, as its crew scrambled across the deck in obvious panic. "What's happening?" she whispered into her hidden communicator, her voice barely audible above the chaos erupting around them. Major Bae Hyunwoo's response came through crackling with static and tension. "Unknown contacts emerging from hyperspace. This isn't part of the simulation, Do-yeon. We've got real hostiles incoming." The massive viewing screens around the observation deck flickered and changed, no longer showing the planned exercises, but displaying real-time tactical data. 40 ships had appeared from nowhere, their sleek black hulls reflecting no light, like holes torn in the fabric of space itself. Do-yeon pressed her eye to the scope, watching as the confident alien fleets tried to respond to this unexpected threat. The Keltharian battle group, which had been moving in their traditional diamond formation, attempted to pivot and face the newcomers. But their movements were too slow, too predictable. The mysterious attackers didn't wait for formal challenges or diplomatic communications. They simply opened fire, and their tactics made no sense according to everything the galaxy knew about warfare. Instead of targeting the largest ships first, they went after support vessels. Instead of maintaining formation, they scattered like leaves in a storm, only to converge on targets from impossible angles. They used debris as shields, turned retreat into attack, and seemed to change their strategy every few seconds. "Their patterns are completely random," reported a Vorthak tactical officer over the open communication channel, his voice bubbling with confusion. "Our computers cannot predict their next move." Do-yeon watched through her scope as the galaxy's most advanced military forces crumbled under the assault. The Zephyrian cruisers, known for their impenetrable shields, found themselves outflanked by enemies who had somehow positioned themselves in their blind spots. The Thorian ground forces, famous for their disciplined ranks, broke apart as the attackers used tactics that weren't in any military manual. "They're not fighting like any known species," Major Bae's voice came through her earpiece, tight with realization. "Look at how they move. No formation, no pattern, just pure improvisation." Do-yeon's heart began to race as she watched the systematic destruction of forces that had seemed invincible just moments before. Ship after ship fell to attackers who fought with a style that seemed familiar, yet impossible. The mysterious enemy didn't rely on superior technology or overwhelming firepower. Instead, they used cunning, adaptability, and a willingness to try things that any sane military commander would consider suicide. They turned their weaknesses into strengths and made chaos work for them instead of against them. "Sir," she whispered into her communicator, her voice barely steady as the terrible realization hit her. "They fight like us. These attackers, they're using human tactics." The moment General Ko Minho's voice crackled through every hidden communicator across the battlefield, everything changed. His words cut through the screaming sirens and explosions like a knife through silk. "All teams drop cover. Time to show them what primitive really means." Captain Lee Juno was the first to act. He reached up and pulled off the Keltharian helmet that had hidden his human face for weeks. The synthetic armor followed piece by piece, revealing the simple black combat suit underneath. Around him, other aliens began doing the same thing. What had looked like a station full of various species suddenly transformed into something else entirely. Humans emerged from every corner, every shadow, every hiding place where they had been watching and waiting. They had been right there all along, invisible in plain sight. Sergeant Kimara threw off her Vorthak disguise and immediately started working on the nearest alien weapon system. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, rewiring circuits and bypassing safety protocols that the original designers never imagined anyone would dare to touch. "This is impossible," shouted a Keltharian commander, his mandibles clicking so fast they sounded like a machine gun. "Humans were banned from these exercises. How are you here?" Ara looked up from her work, a grin spreading across her face as sparks flew from the modified weapon in her hands. "Yeah, well, we're really bad at following rules." The mysterious attackers had been systematically destroying the alien fleets, using tactics they thought were uniquely their own. But now they found themselves facing something they hadn't expected. Humans who had spent months studying not just alien warfare, but the attackers' own methods. Lieutenant Yu Dana had been disguised as a maintenance worker on the observation deck. Now she revealed herself as one of Earth's finest marksmen, using a sniper rifle she had assembled from spare parts scattered throughout the station. Her first shot took out the lead attacker's navigation system, sending the ship spinning. Out of control. The attackers had been winning because they fought with chaos and unpredictability. But humans had invented chaos. They had been improvising solutions to impossible problems since they lived in caves and fought off predators with sticks and stones. Private Shin Hana turned a broken alien communication array into an electromagnetic bomb, hurling it at an enemy ship with the timing of a professional athlete. The explosion disabled 3 attackers at once, their own weapons turned against them by human ingenuity. "They're adapting to our tactics," one of the mysterious attackers transmitted on an open channel, his voice tight with something that might have been fear. Major O Taiho, who had been posing as a Thorian engineer, laughed as he welded together pieces of destroyed alien equipment into something that looked like it came from a scrapyard, but worked better than the original. "I think you invented improvisation. We've been making something from nothing since before your species learned to fly." The battlefield that had been dominated by systematic alien destruction suddenly became a showcase of human creativity, stubbornness, and sheer refusal to accept defeat. Private Shinhana found herself staring at a badly damaged Keltharian fighter that was spinning slowly through space, its engines dead and its hull cracked open like an egg. Most people would see it as space junk. But Hana saw it as ammunition. She climbed into the pilot seat of a human shuttle, her hands flying over controls that weren't designed for her species. The alien interface fought her every move, but she had spent months learning to make foreign. Technology bent to her will. "This is either brilliant or completely insane," she muttered to herself as she lined up her approach. The plan was simple. Use the dead fighter as a battering ram against the enemy flagship, then eject at the last possible second. Any sane species would call it suicide. Humans called it creative problem-solving. The massive enemy vessel loomed. Ahead of her, its dark hull bristling with weapons that could vaporize her shuttle in an instant. But the ship's crew was focused on the human fighters darting around them like angry wasps. They never saw the damaged Keltharian fighter coming until it was too late. The impact sent shockwaves through both vessels. Hana ejected just as the collision tore through the flagship's main hull, her escape pod tumbling through space as explosions lit up the darkness behind her. Captain Lee Juno watched from his command position as the enemy fleet tried desperately to adapt to human tactics. They had been winning by using chaos and unpredictability, but now they faced opponents who had turned chaos into an art form. "Target their coordination node," he ordered, studying the enemy formation through his tactical display. "They're copying our playbook, but they don't understand the most important part." "Which is?" asked his communications officer. "Improvisation isn't just about being random. It's about finding solutions that shouldn't work, but do anyway." Lieutenant Kang Doyon had been watching the enemy command ship through her sniper scope for 20 minutes, waiting for the perfect shot. While other marksmen focused on the heavily armored sections, she had noticed something else, a small structural joint that looked insignificant, but actually supported the ship's entire communication array. Her rifle was cobbled together from alien components that weren't meant to work together. The scope came from a Vorthak surveillance drone, the barrel from a Thorian mining laser, and the trigger mechanism from a human pistol. It shouldn't have been accurate enough to hit a target, the size of a dinner plate from 3 kilometers away, but it was. The shot punched through the structural weak point, and the entire enemy communication system collapsed like a house of cards. Without coordination, the attacking fleet began to fall apart. One by one, the mysterious vessels that had seemed unstoppable just hours before began retreating. Some limped away with engines smoking. Others fled with their hulls cracked and their weapons disabled. The last enemy ship disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind only debris and the stunned silence of 50 alien species. The observation deck was quiet, except for the soft hum of life support systems. Alien commanders who had dismissed humans as primitive now stared at the tactical displays in disbelief. 50 species with centuries of military tradition had failed where humans succeeded. Not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through pure stubborn refusal to accept that anything was impossible. The Galactic Council chamber had never been this quiet. The same massive room that had echoed with mocking laughter, just weeks before now, sat in complete stunned silence. Every alien delegate stared at the holographic displays showing combat footage from the Voidwalker exercises, their various forms of communication, chittering, buzzing, tentacle waving, or completely still. Ambassador Hangina stood at the center of it all, no longer the dismissed representative of a primitive species. The footage played behind her like a movie, but this wasn't fiction. This was humanity proving every assumption wrong. On the screens, Private Shin Hana could be seen turning a broken communication dish into an explosive device, her human hands working with materials that weren't designed to fit together. The camera followed her as she hurled the improvised bomb at an enemy ship, the explosion taking out 3 attackers at once. The Vorthak delegate's tentacles, which had been constantly moving with amusement during the first council meeting, now hung completely motionless. His large eyes, usually bright with condescension, stared at the screen as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Another section of footage showed Captain Lee Juno and his team emerging from their alien disguises. The moment when humans revealed they had been hiding in plain sight for weeks sent ripples of shock through the assembled delegates. Some species shifted uncomfortably in their seats, realizing how completely they had been fooled. The Keltharian ambassador's mandibles, which had clicked with such amusement before, were now clamped shut. His black eyes tracked the movement of human soldiers who turned space debris into weapons, who used broken alien technology in ways its creators never imagined possible. Impossible, whispered a Thorian delegate, his crystalline form flickering with disbelief. They had no advanced technology, no superior weapons systems. The footage continued, showing Lieutenant Kang Do-yon's impossible sniper shot that brought down the enemy command structure. The camera zoomed in on her makeshift rifle, a weapon assembled from parts of 3 different alien technologies that should never have worked together. They used our own equipment against us, breathed a Zephyrian representative, her gas-filled helmet fogging with what might have been anxiety. The council speaker, the towering mechanical being that had announced humanity's ban with such finality, now stood frozen. Its red eyes flickered as its processing systems tried to make sense of what it was witnessing. "How?" the speaker finally whispered, its mechanical voice barely audible in the vast chamber. Ambassador Han Jina stepped forward, her human voice carrying clearly through the silence. She looked around at the delegates who had dismissed her species, meeting each alien gaze with steady confidence. "You asked when humanity would evolve beyond our primitive state," she said, her words measured and calm. "The truth is, we never needed to evolve. We just needed you to stop underestimating what primitive can accomplish." She gestured to the screens, where human soldiers continued to achieve the impossible through pure determination and creativity. "You have technology we could never dream of building. Ships that can cross galaxies in moments, weapons that can destroy planets. But you forgot something important. Intelligence isn't about having the best tools. It's about making any tool work when you need it to." The chamber remained silent, 50 species processing the reality that they had been wrong about everything. Within a week of the Voidwalker incident, everything changed. The combat footage that had silenced the Galactic Council was now being broadcast on every communication network across known space. What started as a military debriefing became the most watched video in galactic history. General Ko Minho sat in his office on Earth, staring at a desk covered with communication requests from species that had never bothered to learn how to pronounce human correctly. The Vorthak Admiralty wanted to schedule tactical consultations. The Keltharian War College requested permission to send their finest officers to study under human instructors. Even the proud Thorians, who had never asked anyone for military advice, were practically begging for strategic partnerships. "Sir, you need to see this," Colonel Park Yuna said, entering his office with a tablet displaying incoming diplomatic messages. The screen scrolled endlessly with formal requests, treaty proposals, and something that looked suspiciously like apologies. "The Zephyrian Empire wants to establish a joint training facility," she reported, her voice carrying a hint of disbelief. "They're offering to share their advanced shield technology in exchange for lessons in what they call adaptive combat methodology." Minho leaned back in his chair, remembering how these same species had laughed when Earth requested permission to join their exercises. Now they were offering their most guarded secrets just to learn how humans thought about warfare. "What about the Keltharians?" he asked. "They've officially retracted their statement about humans being barely evolved." "Primates," Yuna replied with a grin. "Their new ambassador specifically requested a formal alliance. Apparently, they want us to teach their military commanders how to think outside established patterns." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The galaxy's most rigid military thinkers now wanted to learn chaos from the species they had dismissed. As primitive, military academies across 50 star systems had made the human combat footage mandatory viewing for all officer candidates. Students who had spent years memorizing perfect formations and textbook strategies now studied how Private Shin Hana turned broken equipment into weapons, how Captain Lee Juno's team had hidden in plain sight for weeks, and how Lieutenant Kang Daojian made an impossible shot with a rifle that shouldn't have worked. "They want us to teach them chaos," Yuna observed, scrolling through more requests from alien military institutions. "Every message is asking the same thing. How do humans make unpredictability work in their favor?" Minho stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the blue sky of Earth. Somewhere out there, representatives from dozens of species were traveling toward their planet, eager to learn from the primitive humans they had once mocked. "You can't teach chaos to someone who doesn't have it in their nature," he said thoughtfully. "But we can teach them to respect it, maybe even work with it instead of against it." The ban on human participation in galactic military exercises hadn't just been lifted, it had been completely reversed. Earth was now being offered command positions in the galaxy's unified defense forces. Species that had excluded humans from their war games now wanted human generals leading their fleets. "Strange how things change," Yuna said, joining him at the window. "A month ago, we weren't allowed to watch their exercises. Now they want us to run them." Major Oteho walked into the same council chamber where humanity had been dismissed and mocked just months before. But everything was different now. The towering seats that had once held arrogant delegates now contained representatives who watched his every move with something that looked like respect, mixed with a healthy dose of fear. He wore a simple Earth military uniform, nothing fancy or intimidating. No advanced alien technology, no ceremonial weapons, just the dark blue fabric that had become a symbol of human ingenuity across the galaxy. The chamber that had once echoed with condescending laughter now hung in respectful silence. "Members of the Galactic Council," Taiho began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "6 months ago you told us that humanity wasn't ready to stand alongside the galaxy's finest. You were right about one thing. We weren't ready to stand alongside you. We were ready to stand in front of you." A few delegates shifted uncomfortably, but no one interrupted. The footage of human soldiers turning the tide against impossible odds had been playing in their minds for weeks. "We could hold grudges," Taiho continued, looking around at faces that had once dismissed his entire species. "We could make you pay for every insult, every moment of condescension, every time you treated us like children playing with toys too dangerous for our understanding." The Vorthak delegate's tentacles twitched nervously. The mechanical council speaker's red eyes flickered, with what might have been concern. These beings had never expected to be on the receiving end of human judgment. "But that's not who we are," Taiho said, his tone softening. "Holding grudges is a luxury we can't afford when there are threats out there that want to destroy all of us." The Keltharian ambassador, the same one who had suggested humans try again in a millennium, slowly rose from his seat. His mandibles clicked with what Taiho had learned was a sign of humility among his species. "Strategic Advisor Taiho," the Keltharian said, his voice lacking any trace of the arrogance it had carried before. "What do you require from us? What must we do to earn humanity's forgiveness and partnership?" Taiho smiled, the same kind of smile a teacher might give to a student who finally understood a difficult lesson. Partnership. Real partnership. Not the kind where one species leads and others follow, but the kind where everyone brings their strengths to the table. He gestured to the viewing screens that still showed images from the recent crisis. "You have technology that can cross galaxies in moments. We have the ability to solve problems that shouldn't have solutions. You have weapons that can destroy planets. We have the creativity to turn anything into a weapon when we need to." The chamber buzzed with quiet conversations as delegates realized what he was offering. Not domination, not revenge, but genuine cooperation between equals. "Together we keep this galaxy safe," Taiho concluded. "Apart, we all fall to the next threat that decides conventional rules don't apply." Over the following months, alliances formed that would have been impossible before the Voidwalker incident. Human advisors worked alongside alien commanders, sharing not just tactics, but ways of thinking. Technology flowed both ways. Humans learned to build better ships, while aliens learned to think outside the blueprints. Humanity had proven that their greatest strength wasn't in warfare or technology, but in something much simpler and much more powerful: the belief that everyone deserved a second chance to prove they could be better.